today. My name's John. I'm one of the pastors, and what Brandy is talking about is an invitation that I extended to all of us last week, whether you're in the room or whether you're watching online, to go on a journey essentially with me that I think will be one of the greatest spiritual growth opportunities, not only in your life, but in the life of our church, maybe that we've ever experienced. And we're calling the initiative forward. So not only is it the name of our teaching series that we started last week that will go for another 5 weeks, but it is a season that we're actually stepping into as a church. And I just want to make sure if you missed last week, or just kind of remind you all of what we're actually doing, it is primarily a spiritual growth initiative that I do believe will have a generosity result. And there are two primary goals of the whole forward initiative, okay? Number one is that we would have 100% engagement or participation. So everyone who calls Christ Church their home to either be here in our services or to join us online and watch that either live or to go back and catch up on that you would step into a group. And I think you could still take advantage of that opportunity where you can sit with other people, you talk about this message, you're learning from one another, and you're discussing the ideas that we're presenting together, and then that you would just simply be talking to your family if that's what you need to do, and you're asking God together, how might God want us to take a step forward at this time here in this season. And I'll just say this again, and I said it last week, that you'll hear no uncertainty from me on if you should be involved, but you're not going to hear what that exactly is. And that's for you to figure out. That's you asking God, how do you want us to be a part of this? And I would just simply ask us, and we'll talk about this more today, that you would just take the next step that God's leading you to take. So that's number one, right? 100% of us would do something, okay? Number two is collectively that we would generate $4 million in generosity over the course of the next 2 years. And so just to be clear about that includes what we're currently giving or we will give if everything just kind of remains the same for the next 2 years, meaning, okay, that we're believing that God would actually double our normal giving from 2 to 4 million over the course of those 2 years. And what that will do is allow us to have some clear expectation on what we can count on for our normal budget, that we could execute all of our current ministries and do them more and even better and expect some growth in the next 2 years. And then to construct a standalone facility that truly would be for our community, a gift for Camden that would have a ministry side and then a sports side that could be multi-use spaces. All of which I think will truly help us to accelerate the mission that we're on to see more and more disconnected and unfulfilled people come to find a full life in Jesus. Now, it is an aggressive goal, right? But I think we can certainly reach it, and here's how that would happen. If everybody does something, okay, that's it. Just everybody does something. And last week I just simply asked, could you, okay, make a commitment to make a commitment? That's it. Would you just make a commitment to make a commitment? And only one of you told me no, and so I think that you wouldn't do that. And so then I'm assuming we're all going to we're saying, okay, God, how would you want us to be involved here? So 2 places where you can get more information about this, okay? Number one is on the website. Just simply go to our regular website, christchurchcamden.com, and you'll find a big banner that says Forward. If you click on Forward, it will take you to a Forward website, which will have the campaign video that we showed last week. That will give you the best information about everything, an overview. It will give you these story videos like Brandy's that we just showed you. It will lay out the goals that we have for the initiative, and then there will be a set of FAQs that might give you the information that you're looking for. The other way you can get all that information is to get a swag bag that we passed out last week that has a bracelet in it and a magnet and a commitment card that we're not doing anything with right now. And then the best piece of information is this guide that we put in there that you should be familiar with that can answer a lot of the questions that you have. If you didn't get one last week, our ushers will have those as you walk out the doors, or you can just go to that table out there in the lobby and get all that stuff. So that's kind of a quick refresher for us. But here's the thing is that at the end of the day, like what we're really trying to do is build some bridges to people in our community, okay, again, who might be disconnected and unfulfilled so that they might walk across them into a relationship with Jesus. And what we do over the next several weeks, I do believe is going to propel us forward into the next several years. Today, though, all I'm asking us to do is to take a step, okay? Would we just consider to take a step as we go forward? Now, many years ago, I took a step. I took a really big step, like literally took a big step into one of the female dorms at my college. So I went to a Christian college, and we had boys' dorms, and we had girls' dorms, and the only way for me to get into that dorm legally without being, reprimanded and suspended is to wait for open house. So a friend and I were going to a basketball game across the street. We remember that there's an open house at the girls' dorm. Let's take a step into the girls' dorm and see if we can get some snacks to take over to the game, okay? So, and then you step into the dorm room, and I took an enormous step towards the big bowl of M&Ms, okay? And it was more than just that. That step into that room led a step into a relationship, okay? That step led to another step, which was a first date to Pizza by Stout in Joplin, Missouri, the most amazing pizza you've ever had, and then the tornado took it away and they didn't rebuild it. But that's another story. That led to a real Valentine's Day dinner in which I assumed the name of one of my friends in order to take his reservation because I just had this late date all of a second. That led me, and if you would, go back with me to the year 1990. That led me to take a step into the Richard Marx concert. Anyone? Okay, you got to go back 30 some years. With one step, I set up a series of next steps. I asked her to marry me. I believed that she would say yes. She did. Our first home, a 12 by 50 foot trailer on our college campus, which was married housing. That step led us to raise 3 great kids together, to bring a family pet into the equation, a hamster, followed by a second hamster, followed by a third hamster. These are replacements, Who are my hamster people? A 4th hamster, a 5th hamster, until we finally said, you know what, let's get a cat. That might last a little bit longer. Now we're cat people, and to grow this beautiful friendship together, right? To go on this journey together, to end up taking a step into this role right here in Christ Church at this time, and to take a step into Georgia. Never thought that was going to happen. And y'all, look, we have a granddaughter now, okay? And next week, we'll have some more pictures. It's been a while since we did that. We'll bring some pictures for you next week. And here's the deal, is that none of those things would have happened if I didn't take that very first crucial step. Now, you've likely taken some big steps before in your life, and some of those weren't very good decisions, right? And you go, man, I should have never done that. I maybe should have never gone there because that step led me to that step. And before you know it, you're in a place that you really didn't want to go to. But maybe you've actually taken a step in your life that led you to a really great place. And you took that step, and it went to a relationship or a job or to move or to a school or to have kids or to make some kind of a change in your life or to pursue a dream or to go to a school or to walk down an aisle, step into counseling, forgive someone, I don't know what it is, to take a step like this one right here and choose to be baptized. And some of you you've put that one off for a while, and there's actually going to be some people at the end of this service, and you go, you know what? I should join them. That might be the step for you. And that one step took you to a whole new level in your life that you wouldn't have ever experienced if you had not taken that step. So here's the question on the very front end today is, would you today maybe be willing to take one step, and the step is to go from where you are right now to what God has for you next? Believing, okay, that it could actually be better than staying there. And I love that we regularly use this language around here, that we're always saying, hey, would you just kind of take your next step, which allows it to become an all play, and it's something everyone has a chance to get in on. So today we're going to look at this idea of taking a step forward by faith. And last week, we started a journey with Joshua, and he's leading the Hebrew people who have been in captivity, and then they've been wandering around in a circle in the desert, and now they're right up on the doorstep of a future that God's promised to them, and it's over there. And when we left him last week, okay, God was pumping him up with a lot of, hey, be strong and courageous, man. Be strong and very courageous. Be strong and courageous. And it was God kind of giving him an infusion of courage. And we learned this phrase, rak kazak. Did anyone use that one this last week? Okay, a lot of people did, and you're like, I got text from a lot of you going, hey, just so you know, I've been saying this a lot this week. I was like, great, good for you. Be strong and courageous. He's going to need that today because God gave him one instruction, and it is to get the people across the Jordan River. And Joshua took a courageous step last week when he actually announced to everybody, hey, in 3 days, everybody meet back right here, and then we're going to cross that river, all of us. That'll be all. See you tomorrow. 3 days. And it's Joshua going, okay, because I believe that God has something better for us on the other side, right? There's more for us on the other side. There's actually a better future for all of us on the other side. And I think that's true for you, and I do think it's true for me as well today. Something could be standing between where you are right now and the future that God has for you. Or it could be a place that he is calling you to. It could be a person that he's inviting you to become. It could be a promise that's actually waiting for you. And to go forward in any area of your life, it's going to require a step of faith. And that certainly applies to what we're asking God for in this season as a church. So, Joshua chapter 3, verse 3 goes this way. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God carried by the Levitical priests, you're to break camp and follow it. But keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between yourselves and the ark. Don't go near it so that you can see the way to go, for you haven't traveled this way before. So just stop for a second, okay? Here's Joshua, and I picture them likely standing next to the Jordan River, and they're looking over to the other side. And we've got to get everyone from this side over to that side. And I think it's likely, and these are the best estimates that I can kind of figure out, that we're talking about 2 million people who are a part of the nation, okay? And I just kind of did some quick numbers yesterday while I was watching football. Look, we're talking about more people than live in all of Camden County, Charlton County, Glenn County, Nassau County, and even Duval County. We got to get all those people from this side of the river over to that side of the river, and all they have to go on so far from God is that you're going to have to cross it. They don't have the full plan, right? Here's what we're starting with, the priests. Okay, so the priests are the representatives of God to the people, and we represent the people back to God, and they're going to carry the Ark of the Covenant, and everyone else is going to stay back, and we're going to follow that thing, right? The Ark is going to be central to this entire event going forward, okay? It's this massive box. It's made out of wood. It's covered in gold. It is so sacred, like you don't touch it, you don't look inside of it, or people die when they do that. It has 3 very specific things inside of it, okay? And they all represent the promises and the power and the presence of God. Like in there are the stone tablets that God gave to Moses that are written, the 10 Commandments. Those are in the ark. You have a thing called Aaron's rod. Aaron was Moses' brother, and he helped him, approach the Pharaoh. And he had this miraculous, amazing staff that did all kinds of wonderful things. That's in there. And you have a pot of manna, okay? It's this reminder of what God had just done for them for the last 40 years and his promises and provision. And so this ark is covered in gold, and it had this cover that went on the top of it, and it had this seat. Okay, you have these 2 cherubs who are facing each other, and then it created this seat called the mercy seat. And it's this symbol, right? This reminder that God was with people. Like this is the presence of God. He sits in this seat essentially. And that part of last week's promise that we saw, right, is that they are carrying with them this reminder that the living God is among you. Now, the priests are going to carry the ark, right? And God says, keep 1,000 yards between all of the people and the ark. Keep it out there in front of everyone. And partly that's so everyone can actually see it. And partly I think it's a statement, really, like a reminder and a focal point that what we are about to undertake here as a group can only be accomplished as God leads us. Now, up to this point, Joshua has probably 100, I don't know. right? But this thing right here can be accomplished if we follow the movement of God. Hey, how are we actually going to get across here? I don't know, right? How is this actually going to happen? I don't know. Here's what I do know. I do know we're going to follow the movement of God. Now, listen, friends, I think this right here could be the life-changing truth for many of us. That you would not give up on what you do know to do because of what you don't know to do. He's saying, look, we're gonna follow the movement of God. I mean, I could tell you that's how we landed on this idea of forward, right? I believe that God has a big mission for us in this community that we're just now starting to realize, and it started this way. Okay, God, lead us, and we'll follow you. And we've just been taking it one step at a time and trying to sense his movement and then respond as he leads, and here we are. I mean, I'm so glad that a group of people did that 15 years ago. They really followed the movement of God when they stepped out for the first time to begin this church. And essentially, it was the same prayer. Okay, God, lead us and we'll follow. I believe several years down the road, we're going to look back and say, okay, all this right here was because we simply responded to the movement of God. Now, this is interesting because there's always going to be some people who go first. They're always going to go first and make it possible for others to more easily follow. Because there's someone, it's Joshua, and then there's some other people who say, okay, God is moving, let's do this, and it's the priests who are going to go first. Now, let me just interject this real fast. There's actually a note on your program, I believe, and remind you of our Advanced Commitment Night. It's an event on October the 16th. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Your whole family can come to it. We'll have some music. We'll come in here. We'll have worship. And some prayer, and we're going to bring our early commitments. And if you're like, okay, I would love to lead the way and maybe make it more easy for other people to follow, we're going to come in here. We'll do early commitments. That's what the card is all about right there. And I would invite you to consider coming to that and say, hey, I'm going to lead the way and go first. But from the very beginning in this story, before they even crossed the river, they are setting themselves up to be reminded. Okay, everybody stay focused on the ark because God is leading us. Verse 7, the Lord spoke to Joshua. Today, we're going to get continued instructions. Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel so they will know. Now just stop there for a second, because how many of you know this, that every time God calls you to something new in your life or to step out in faith, there will be haters and doubters? You're like, I think I'm going to do this. There's always going to be some people who resist. That's what's happening here. And so, because they didn't think Joshua was probably going to be able to do what Moses did. He was a great leader. We loved him. You don't want to be the guy to follow the guy. And so there are some haters and doubters. And God says, okay, listen, they're about to find out that I will be with you just as I was with Moses. Okay, so now we get the plan. Command the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the water, stand in the Jordan. You jump down to verse 13, we get even more. When the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord, like the Lord of the whole earth, come to rest in the Jordan's water, its water will be cut off. The water flowing downstream will stand up in a mass. So here's the instructions, right? Hey, as soon as the leaders actually get into the river, the water is going to stop, and all the rest of these people are going to be able to safely walk across to the other side. And you might say, okay, that's nice. Like, I wonder what kind of bridges they had back in 1400 BC. That's no bridge. Okay, is this mostly like a dry river bed? No, not at all. The Jordan River, mentioned almost 200 times throughout the scriptures. It was a natural barrier between two lands. The Jordan River begins at the highest point in Israel called Mount Hermon. It descends all the way down to the lowest point on earth and empties into the Dead Sea 1,400 feet below sea level. Probably no more wide than 75 to 100 feet if you're seated in the room. Just imagine the width of the auditorium that you're seated in right now. Probably 10 to 12 feet deep, and then it drops quite rapidly. You add to that this detail we get in verse 15, the Jordan overflows its banks throughout the harvest season. So the picture is a river that's extra large, okay, it's extra wide, it's moving very rapidly, right? It's descending, and there's just a lot lot of movement there. Fast moving, okay, deep water can be one of the scariest things you experience, right? Whitewater rafting, anyone? Who are my rafting people? Oh, awesome, fantastic. I spent several years as a student pastor, and oftentimes we were taking kids to summer camps or conferences in Colorado or Tennessee, and one of the things we would do is to say, hey, we're going to take a half a day and we're going to go whitewater rafting. We're trying to sweeten the pot, get people to come along, okay? It's just, it's a lot of fun. Your heart is pumping, like the adrenaline is just, rushing, and you get this sense of camaraderie with all the people in your raft, and all of your senses are just on, high alert, and you're typically in, beautiful scenic nature. And so we end up on the Ocoee River in Tennessee several years ago, and it's me, it's my wife, it's our friend Jat, a random dad and his two kids, a 10-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, and then our guide, okay? And then you meet the guide, and we come to find out that the guide is new. And when I say new, I don't mean like new to the Ocoee. I don't mean like new to this summer season. No, he's new to guiding a raft, okay? And so then you stand around, you get all the instructions, you put your vests on, you get your oar, and then we sit in the raft and we do some practice, okay? You practice on this side and that side and listening to his instructions, and okay, here we go. And so we carry the raft down, we put it into the river, and sometimes you're just like, it just feels a little shaky right from the beginning. I'm not really sure how this is going to turn out. Do I want to do this for the next 2 hours? And we're coming to one of the first rapids, okay? We're going to have to take kind of a sharp right turn, and we're coming to one of the first rapids. And listen, it goes against everything that your mind is really telling you to do, but you're supposed to stare that thing right in the face and even paddle down into it, okay? Now, it was out of fear, because I remember him talking, no, we're going to go around the rapid, okay? And it's out of fear that he didn't want to go that way. He tried to shortcut the rapid, and right on that sharp right turn, hit an enormous rock. Now, a lot of times you'll hit a rock and you just kind of bounce off and you keep going and it's normal. Not so, okay? We hit the thing, we bounced, and you look back and the guide went flying, and so he's not in the raft anymore. He's in the river somewhere, and we're stuck on the rock. This is not an actual photo. I ripped this from the Nantahala website, I believe. But he goes out, and then we're actually stuck on this rock halfway down a rapid, okay? Now, I thought this was an easy thing that should not have happened, and I'm thinking about it years later. I actually went back to their website, and I found this, okay? Listen to this. Ocoee Rapids range from 2 to 4, if that means anything to you. It's the middle of the scale of whitewater rapids. Exciting, but not too intimidating for beginning or seasoned rafters. Now listen to this sentence. The first rapid, which is the one I fully believe that I'm talking about, the first rapid just around the corner from the put-in sometimes gives beginners a hard time. Okay, beginners. Now we're stuck on this thing halfway down the rapid, and we lose the kid. And then we lose the dad. And this is not really it, but this is how I remember it. We're stuck. Like, just imagine being stuck right there. We lose the kid, we lose the dad. When my friend Jat and I stand up to see if we can find this kid in the river, we get taken out by another raft who's come behind us, okay? So now we're all in the river, the boy is missing, and the raft, which is stuck on the rock, okay? There are two people inside the raft that is stuck, a 13-year-old girl and my wife, okay? My friend Jat, who manages to be hanging on to the rope of this raft, somehow finds his way and climbs back into it. And now we're going, well, where's the kid? Where's the kid? Where's the kid? We haven't seen the kid yet. And all of a sudden, you're looking 200 yards down the river, and he's popped up and he's floating down the river, way down there, okay? So I'm 50 yards down the river. They somehow dislodge the raft. You get back on and you're going. We pick up everybody. We finally get in the boat. And you can imagine, like, everybody's mad. We're so hacked off at this guy. The trip is a disaster. Nobody's talking the rest of the way, except we're sharing the 1-star review that we're going to leave about this guide right here. Okay, now listen. It sounds counterintuitive. But the only way that you successfully get through this river, okay, is to steer your raft in the direction of your fear and to ride the current and go all in on the rapid. Now listen, when God tells Joshua, hey, listen, the priests are going to have to step in the river, This is not like, they might be able to put a little toe in and test the water. That's not it. There's nothing tentative about this. There's no opportunity to ease into the river in this condition. Way back in 1854, an expert swimmer decided to test it, to swim from this point in the river at this season of the year all the way across. Was unable to do it because it was too wide and too strong. So you imagine you're the priest in the front and you're about ready to lead this procession and you're going to be the first one to step into the river. I know what I would do. I would turn around to the guy behind me and say, I've been leading a lot lately. Why don't you take a turn? And I'm sitting in at the kitchen counter yesterday, and I was just kind of reading over the story one more time. And the section I'm getting ready to read for you about the moment where they step in, it just kind of came over me, and I go, I wonder if this is just like one of those really solemn moments. And so I read it as if this whole nation of 2 million people maybe had just gone completely silent. It was dead quiet. I'm trying to envision the ark, the priests who would hoist it up using these poles and carry it on their shoulders, and maybe the rest of the nation watching from 1,000 yards away. Like, do they all just go quiet? Like, are they holding their breath? Are they closing their eyes? Who are the people who are whispering, this will never work? Are they praying? Are they worshiping? Are they collectively trusting God? And I just want us as quietly as possible to listen to this scene. But as soon as the priests carrying the ark reached the Jordan, their feet touched the water at its edge, and the water flowing downstream stood still, rising up in a mass that extended as far as Adam, a city next to Zarethan. The water flowing downstream into the Dead Sea was completely cut off, and the people crossed opposite Jericho. The priests carrying the ark of the Lord's covenant stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel crossed on dry ground until the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan. And I just wonder, how long do they maybe stand on the edge just kind of looking at the water? Or do they walk up to it and go, hey, we got our orders, and then they just jump right in? And who is that first guy, right? Like, who is the guy who goes, okay, here we go, rock Kazakh. But they step into the water, no turning back. They take their position in the middle, somewhere upriver, 19 or 20 miles or so. Maybe a priest is yelling, hey, it's starting to recede. I think the water's slowing down. Listen, I don't know how it really happened. Here's what I do know, is that absolutely nothing changes about their circumstances until someone takes a huge step of faith with just a little bit of confidence that what God said was true could be true. See, I know that faith always moves you forward. See, their faith doesn't stop the river, right? God does that, but God does that because of their faith as soon as they step in. The water doesn't stop flowing until people start walking. And to go forward, right, towards the future God has for them, we're going to have to cross from this side to that side. I think that's true for you and I as well. In order for you to go where God wants you to go, you're likely going to have to take some big steps of faith. It is when, don't miss that, right? It's when, not before, when the priest's feet are standing in the water that God decides to act on their behalf. Nobody gets to the other side, right? Where the blessings are, where the promises of God are waiting, if they don't take that enormous first step of faith. Listen, I've read the entire story many times in the last couple of weeks. Here's how I developed the outline. There's not really rocket science to it. I said, maybe I think we should do Joshua. I pulled out a chair, I sat right here, put my Bible on this table, and I read from Joshua 1 all the way to the end of the story. And nowhere in the story does God move on behalf of the people until after they take a step of faith. Right? God moves not before, only after the people move in faith. And that step of faith is something they take without knowing how it will turn out, right? They are stepping into this thing, no idea how deep it is, and we're trusting that God will do his part. Now, here's a quote from a pastor by the name of Tony Evans. I actually used this way back in February when we went through a series called Battle Ready. I thought it was so good to bring it back. He says this: faith is acting like it is so, even when it is not so, in order that it might be so, simply because God said so. And I don't know if y'all are like me, but sometimes I find myself asking God, hey God, if you would do your part, then I will gladly follow you. Like, you go first, and then I will be right behind you. All right, God, if you do it, then God, you stop the water, I promise I'll be the first one across. It's like this, right? God, if you were to bring me a job offer, then I would quit the one I have. All right, God, show me what my future spouse looks like, and I will totally say goodbye to this dating relationship. Hey, God, show me those blessings right there. I'll start giving. God, show me how all this works out, and I will step into it. But listen, that's not how it works. You're likely not going to see God move in a mighty way on your behalf until you take a step of faith. So it's a simple question, right? What step of faith could you take today so that you could go forward into what God has for you? And you might say, okay, well, I'm going for it. And it's not like a stupid thing. It's not like reckless or irresponsible. Again, we're talking about you being convinced that God has called you to the other side, and he's just waiting for you to take the step of faith. God could have done this without them, right? But it's their trust and their faith was a way for them to be a part of what God was doing. And if God doesn't stop the water, right, then you're not getting through. And God doesn't stop the water until you step into it. Now, if we're going to make it, right, it is because God comes through like God promised he would do. So, well, what if the only thing standing between you and what God has for you is a step of faith? Because there will always be a first step that sets you up for a next step. Some of you did it. You walked in here today and you're like, man, that was a big deal for me. Great. Now you're set up to take another step. But you did it. You took a first step. Some of you today, your step is to trust him, like for the first time ever in your life, to place your faith and your trust in Jesus. And here's the deal, is that some of you have all of the information that you need. Like, you're over-informed, and God likely isn't going to give you more information. He's waiting for you to take a step of faith. It might be, we mentioned this, baptism. It might be to move or change something. I don't know. It might be to take a step towards generosity. Listen, there are some amazing things that you're going to get to experience that other people won't, because they don't have the courage to take that step of faith. They will remain, unfortunately, on the other side of the river. Never experienced the new, right? The exciting, the bold, the adventure, all the promises that God has for them. This is going to be true for some of us, unfortunately, that there are some things that you're never going to experience because you won't take that step of faith, right? Faith is just standing here going, okay, I'm going to trust what God says is true, and I will take that step, and God responds to your faith. So what is it? Okay, what is the step of faith standing between where you are now and where God wants you to be? Because what you're doing, or what we're talking about doing, is exactly what the priest did in the story. You are saying yes to God before you know exactly how he's going to provide. Again, because we're confident, okay, that he has something better for us than staying here. Now, let me give you one example specific to what we're talking about here. When it comes to forward, okay, specifically, I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know how you're going to be involved, but it's likely going to require a step of faith, okay? If you've looked through this at all and you go all the way to the very back, we actually put a bunch of steps on the very last page, all right? These are steps of faith. They're steps of generosity, essentially. But you just simply look at where you are and you go, okay, what is my next step? That's going to require you to have some faith, okay? Now, if you can take your next step and it doesn't require faith, guess what you should do? You should take 2 steps. You should take enough that actually requires you to believe that God is going to carry you from where you are to where he wants you to be. Now, I wonder what stands between you, okay, and where you want to be. Like if you're on this side, right, and you're looking to the other side thinking, okay, well, that's the future, right? That's where all of the promises are. And you're standing here, but you know that over there is where God wants you to be, right? We're standing here. We know that over there is where God is actually calling us to move. A lot of us are standing over here, but on that side is where all the broken relationships on this side get restored. Right? You're standing here, but it's really over there where addictions are broken and patterns are corrected and strongholds get resolved. So it's over there, right? I mean, you're standing here. Over there is where peace reigns, not worry. The calm is over there, away from the anger, right? The courage is there. The fear is here. So you're standing here, but it's really over there where all of your hopes and your dreams and your future and the works God has planned for you, right? I'm standing here in the present, but over there is the future. And guess what? You can leave this in the past, but it requires you to take a step of faith. Listen, if we're going to live the life that God has for us, I mean, there's no way around it. We're going to have to get our feet wet. And you can't wait for God to part the waters. You can't wait for him to miraculously transport you over to the other side. The only way to get from here to there is a courageous step, right? To trust what God says is true and step in. And remember, okay, it's only after you get your feet wet that God provides dry ground. And you walk from where you are now to the place that he has waiting for you. And listen, this is the amazing part. Go back to the beginning. You will know what next step to take as you follow the movement of God. And I'm going to pray to that end this morning, that you would do that. You would listen to God and his movement, and you would courageously step with faith into what he has next. So God, this morning we pray over all these things. God, I thank you for this story, the amazing journey of Joshua, the way that he steps in with courage, that he leads by example through faith. God, he's trusting you. And God, I pray that for those of us who are in the room, who are watching today, God, as you lay it on our hearts, what it is that you're calling us to. God, a promise that you have put in front of us. God, a person that you're calling us to be. God, I pray today that we would sense your movement to believe that you are with us, and by faith, take a step in your direction. And God, we're believing that you will provide. God, we are trusting that you will part the waters so we can walk across safely on dry ground. So God, we thank you for these things today, and we pray them in the name of Jesus. Amen.